Hello Leapers, you are about to watch an interview with Genevieve Tyrrell, but before that I wanted to share something with you which came as a bit of a surprise to me. I ran this interview with Genevieve on a Friday evening, and the day after that I was chatting with Caitlin Bassett, not for an interview, we were just swapping some messages, and I mentioned that I'd spoken to Genevieve, and she said, "Oh, Genevieve's a saint." I said, "What do you mean?" And she said, "Okay, you have to find a way to put this story that I'm about to share with you in the interview." The interview had already been recorded. It was a little bit too late to do it during the recording, so I'm going to share with you what Caitlin shared with me now before the interview starts. So this is, in Caitlin's words, when we were filming the first season, my aunt died. She was like a second mother to me, and it was brutal. To get me to her funeral, I had to get written out of a few scenes in episode 109, Fellow Travellers, so I could take a red-eye to Virginia. I barely got there in time for the funeral. Well, I'd been working so much and living out of a suitcase that I didn't have a dress for the funeral. Well, Genevieve heard and said, "I got you." And the day I was about to fly out, she'd left me 5 black dresses in my trailer with shoes and jackets, so I could have something to wear for my aunt's funeral. This is it's October now. I know they were filming Fellow Travellers last October, November, so this must have been a year back, and this obviously stuck with Caitlin enough that she insisted that this goes somewhere in the interview. So during the course of the interview, you're going to see Genevieve, in her own words, explain her process, talk about leadership, how she works with her team. But it's very rare with these interviews that we get an insight into someone's person from somebody else. So I'm really pleased. Thank you, Caitlin, for sharing that with me. And now, on with the interview. Hello Leapers, this is Matt at the Quantum Leap podcast, and I'm really excited today because I have with me here the costume designer for Quantum Leap. It's Genevieve Tyrrell. Genevieve, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. It's fun to talk about the thing that we do day in and day out now that we're hopefully post-strike.
Yeah, hopefully back soon. And I'm really looking forward to hearing about what you do, because I'll be honest, I don't know much about how costume design. I don't know anything about how costume design works. So I'm really interested to hear about the process. Really interested to hear about your contribution. And a show like Quantum Leap, the costumes are probably up there with the sets as one of the main things that sell how unique this show is. So loads of cool stuff to talk about.
Yeah, thank you for recognizing that. Yeah, thank you.
I think a lot of people do. So let's start off talking about yourself before we get on to Quantum.
Okay.
You've been in the business since, I think, about 94. Can you tell me how you got started? What were some of your earliest experiences in the industry?
Sure. I was going to school to be a fashion designer, and then I moved to Los Angeles to continue studying and started working at Fred Segal, which is was a very hipster kind of place to be in the 90s and previously, and met all kinds of stylists and costume designers, and realized after they would call me and ask me to pull things for them that I loved film, and I loved the narrative word, and I loved, every facet of it. I thought, why did I never think of this before? And and so I changed my direction to become a costume designer. And I told basically everybody that would come through those doors that I would be an intern or a PA or whatever they needed me to be. And a number of people who did commercials and music videos took me up on it. And then everything that was low budget that they didn't want to do, I did. So I was fortunate enough to do the Counting Crows and a bunch of other musical acts that I then stayed with for a number of years.
Nice.
Yeah. And through my commercial contacts, one of them was Nicole Lalogia, who was one of the producers of Swingers. So then she brought me in to meet Jon Favreau and Doug Liman, and I designed Swingers, and then I had a movie career. So it kind of just took off from there.
That and Swingers is such a cool place to start. I gather you're also in Swingers as well. I've never spotted you, but
it's so silly.
I noticed your credit.
It's so I know, and I'm always looking. Whenever I see that on IMDb, I have to think about it a couple times. I'm literally like, they're talking about hot girls at a party, and I walk through the frame, and that's but literally no acting was involved, and somehow I am credited for that.
Hey, more strings to your bow, and thank you for the tip, because now we can go back and find and try and spot you. So Swingers, big start. What happened next? I know we've got 20 years to cover in a few short minutes. So
all right, let me encapsulate
what happened over that time?
20 years.
Yeah.
I then became, very much the niche of dressing hip guys and creating some hierarchy of cool within, male fashion in film. And I did a number of independent films in the 90s. It was sort of, back to back to back indie films. And certainly that was the heyday for making indies. And then, that parlayed itself into making bigger budget movies and meeting different people at Disney in particular, which seems like a kind of an odd twist. But I was hired to design some movies over there, and I worked with Andy Fickman a great deal, this director who I did maybe four or five movies with. And a lot of, things in between that, certainly. But I then moved exclusively into film and didn't really do that many commercials or music videos anymore. And then from film, I started adding in TV when I was doing pilots, but not doing the series. And then I did Entourage. So I did the first season of Entourage, basically the pilot in the first season. And then I left, I had a child, and then I came back with designing the movie Dukes of Hazzard, and then went back and forth between TV and film for the next however many years that has been. So, and wait, a lot of things in between there. I'm going to a thing for Freaky Friday tonight because I designed Freaky Friday. Yeah,
fabulous. Yeah, and you're going to a thing for that tonight?
Yeah, there's a screening that a bunch of the crew has decided to all go to, and so we're all getting together, which is a first. We haven't, done that ever since making the movie. So it'll be fun. Yeah.
Yeah, I imagine that was that film would have been a lot of fun to work on as well.
It was one of the absolute funnest movies. I mean, Jamie Lee Curtis, as everyone now knows, the whole world really is quite aware of what an amazing force of nature she is.
Yes.
At the time, I was just, so, it was the first time I'd worked with her, and I was wowed beyond, and the Lindsay Lohan of it all, it was before she kind of dropped off the other side for a while. And we just had a great time making it. It was, we knew it was going to be something really special.
Speaking of something really special, that in a clunky way segues us into Quantum Leap. Can you tell me how you got involved in this relaunch? Because you've been with the new show since the start, right?
Correct. I was interviewed for it, and not the only, but one of a primary amount of things I had done prior to this show that were period was a giant pilot for ABC called Triangle that didn't get picked up. But I had so many period costumes in that. So I was able to put together boards to show the producers and so forth for the interview. And also I had done the Evel Knievel biopic that actually never got shot, but I have beautiful fitting photos. So, it was nice to take everything that had come before that hadn't been seen and present it that way. And so I met with the producers maybe 2 weeks before we started shooting and had a very, very short time to prep it and turn around that first episode for 101. So, and then, it was kind of just off to the races because, it's every week, as you know, because you do watch our show. It's a period movie. It's an action movie. And so the process is has to be intrinsic and also just you can never just stop and just hang out and have a nice quiet afternoon. It's never going to be that show. It's always going to be, researching, and the process starts again and again, rinse, repeat.
Can you tell me a bit about that
Sure.
process, besides the fact that it's incredibly packed, I'm sure, having to do all this new work again and again? What does that look like from start to finish?
Well, fortunately, the writers are great, and we're never waiting on a script, which is a huge, huge bonus for any show, but particularly this show. So while we're still shooting the show that has been prepped, so say, 201, is on its second day of shooting, I have already read the next episode, and I'm already deep into the internet, basically. I use Shot Deck, which I highly recommend. It's created by a cinematographer, and it has tons and tons of stills from films that would not otherwise be found on the internet. So it's a very great resource. So I pull those for the costume boards that I'm creating for the upcoming episode. And then we also use occasionally, not always, there are a few other websites that have Sears catalogs from all the years, and JCPenney catalogs and things like that. So
Brilliant.
Those are a wonderful resource, and that's another online resource. There are a couple different costume houses that have amazing amounts of Life magazine and Time magazine bound together. So they truly have a library, and I've gone in there and sat there with Genius Scan and scanned pages and pages and pages of things for any given episode, because it's nice to see what people are wearing, not just in the photo shoots, the spreads in the magazines, but also in the ads that they're showing in the magazines, which you don't always find online. So there's that. And then what we do is, excuse me, so while I'm making the complete set of costume boards, I then pull out also generally the five people who are my HQ principals, whether it's Magic, Ian, Jen, Addison, all of the rest, sometimes Tom, right? So I pull all of their costumes out and create a board of their looks too. So that goes into that equation. I also create boards for what the background will wear. So that's a lot of, additional research. So my initial boards for any given episode are maybe 20 pages. And then, we cull it down. And once I start having fittings, then those actual pieces that are chosen go onto the boards. The idea of them is swapped out for the actual look on the boards. But we also, one of the major challenges of this particular costume department is that with Ben, when he's leaping into the host, we then need to find a period vintage costume that, out at a costume house or somewhere out there, that is a good representation of what we would like for him to be in for the actual episode. And then we go and we try that on him so we can use it as a pattern. We source the fabrics and the trim, the buttons, the zippers, the everything, so they're period correct. The shoes, hats, whatever else, the belts, so that it's all period correct. And so then we custom make Ben and his host and the stud
presumably different sizes. So
and the stud double, and sometimes the driving double. So we'll have maybe 5 to 7 of any given costume, multiples. So we always have to find bolts of fabric that have at least 15 yards or something like that, so that we can create this illusion that it's just a period action movie, and it's just it's amazing how it just all comes together. So that's the hugest thing. And also Ray is generally in every scene, so oftentimes we get him for like half an hour before he goes to ADR on any given day. Like that's his day off, is he goes to ADR and comes to us for fitting, his one day off. So we're very fortunate, because he is such a great and generous human with his time and humor and easygoing spirit. He's really pretty wonderful.
he sings it.
Yeah,
Good.
yeah. I mean, the whole cast is. I have such a fondness for each of them, and they're all so incredibly different in the show, but in real life too. So it's been a really wonderful experience.
And just to your point about, because I hadn't really considered just how many doubles of each of the costumes you must have to have. I guess something like Leap, Die, Repeat, where he's in 5, 6 different hosts throughout that episode.
Yeah. That
must have been especially challenging in that respect.
Absolutely. It was actually one of my favorite episodes to design. I think I think Margarita Matthews is one of the most clever, interesting writers, and certainly anything she devises has a really interesting twist to it. And to create, 5 of the same costume for Ben and the person, the 5 different hosts in the elevator, right? Was a huge challenge, but because it was in the spirit of it being such a well-crafted script and such a fun idea that, we just loved it. It was one of our favorites.
It's funny you should mention Raymond's good humour. We were interviewing Deborah Pratt a few days back, and she said to say hi. And she also said to remind you that the fans want to see Raymond suffer in heels. And she thinks you've been very kind to him so far.
I have been. I know she wanted me to put him in some stilettos when he was the flight attendant. And, it's not that I can't do, I could probably get Ray to do that for sure. However, the amount of action that's required of Ray so often would be torturous. And I just feel like I'm just not that much of a torturer. I mean, you've watched the show enough to know that there's not many wides. We could cheat it, just full length wide shots. But, on the plane there were, because of the way, just the shape of an airplane to shoot in. So, but yeah, no, I guess I have been.
Anytime you want to torture Ray, just know you've got fandom behind you. We love Ray, but at the same time,
Ray.
He's playing the leaper. He's designed to suffer. That's what Scott had to do it as well.
Right. I do have to say too about Ray that he is a really great leader amongst crew and cast on set, and he is always wanting to know and looking out for all of us. He's very imbued in being in a leadership role. It's by choice. So it's a wonderful thing to watch.
Yeah, I think it's an important part of the success of the show. It shows to those of us watching closely, and it shows in the interviews that we run as well, the interplay between all the actors and the production personnel. Yeah,
I've designed shows where that was the case was the opposite. So I speak with great authority when I say it makes a big difference.
I can imagine.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's interesting. You mentioned about doing that. Obviously, the kind of the hard research on the eras, but also then choosing outfits for the project. Is there any kind of link between the two? Are you trying to reflect in some subtle way that's going over my head? What's going on in the league? What's going on in the project? How do you tie those together, if at all?
Yes. Well, what I like to do at the outset of every episode when I've done the research for the period, so I have a pretty broad overview of what the palette will be for, say 1970s. And so then I go and I look in my closets for my lead actors in the HQ project and pull out something that's completely contrary to that in both color and also tone. There are times when, with Addison being the hologram, she needs to be in the period scene, within her hologram. And so I don't want her to be wearing anything that looks like the period we're in, or also in the color scheme of the period. So it's something that has to be complementary in both the period scenes and the scenes at HQ.
Interesting. That also explains something that I think a few of us have wondered, which is in the original series, for kind of half of that reason, Al always used to be dressed in outrageous outfits so that he stuck out against whatever was going on in the period. And I think a few of us have had this question: well, why not have Addison in those kind of outrageous outfits? But of course, there's that other half she's got to fit in at the project as well.
Right. Yeah. And she's such a wonderful actress and so malleable as far as, she comes from, the world of the military, and she comes into a fitting and she'll change into 50 things in 50 minutes. She's amazing, and she looks great at everything. And it's wonderful to dress her. She's not inhibited at all about, anything that I might put her in. So I mean, we could do something crazy, but it's not really the tone, is it?
Yeah.
So.
Well, you got her into a Fermi suit this season, which was a lovely throwback to the original series. So we're happy with that.
Nice, yeah.
You mentioned also, and I just want to go back to it quickly, about the background. And I imagine on a quote unquote normal production, you'd spend a lot of time on the foreground artists, and then you'd be able to pull stuff out of some kind of stock or storage for the background. But when you've got, and I'm thinking of things like Fellow Travelers, where you've got dozens of extras dressed in 70s outfits, what do you do with that? How direct are you how directly involved are you in creating the look there?
Well, what we do is I have a great team that heads up the background end of this show. And part of the secret sauce of what makes this come together as quickly as it does is knowing which costume house to go to that specializes in something like 70s, like you're saying. So for example, on that episode, we had all of our fittings out at Eastern Costume. And so the primary amount of stock was pulled at Eastern, and everybody came through there. And then we shoot 2 different looks for each background and artist. And then we, upload it and create boards for them as well. So that we have, we've already established that what the color palette should be, what the look is. And hopefully, obviously during COVID times, there was a lot of attrition that people would be fit and then wouldn't show, or, so there was issues in that way. But I think we created, maybe a 20% buffer or a 30% buffer to accommodate that. But yeah, so a lot of times we're at either Eastern, United, or Warner Brothers costumes. Those are our top 3 primary places that we, choose. We know that Warner Brothers will have like the best 80s stock, or, we know that United has the best 30s, 40s, basically 50s too. And a lot of times, strangely, at United Costume, we have United American. There have been enough big movies that have come through there and have stock there now that there can sometimes be multiples of shirts or different things that have been custom made by films past. So they're in the period section that they're appropriate for. But so we squirrel them away. When Mrs. Maisel wrapped, they sent everything to Western Costume. Western Costume bought a lot of it, and we did. We went in and we saw 2 racks of men's shirts, and we were like, "Oh, we need these. We're just keeping them. We know we're going to need them, and that prevents us from having to custom make shirts." So it's the little things that save time that we really value so much.
I can imagine on something that scale.
Yeah.
Is there anything particular that we should look out for? Is there like a particularly famous character in a famous film that, if we look closely in the background of an episode?
Oh, it's interesting.
An unintentional Easter egg, perhaps?
Oh, yeah. If I think of one in particular, oftentimes if I find something in a costume house, especially at Western, you're going to get that real rich film history. And a lot of the things that are period were custom made, and they'll have a patch sewn into the neck of the shirt or the suit jacket or something. And it says Western Costume, and then it'll say the actor's initials, like R. Reagan or somebody, and it'll say the year it was made. And so you start, or whatever it is. I always take a picture of those little patches when I see them, because it is such a cool I love that costume history part of it, that you just, climbing up into, we call it the stacks, when you climb up the ladder into the racks of
Yeah.
costumes. Say we call over to Angels and Berman's every once in a while, which is your local costume department, and they have an amazing stock too. But um, but only if we can't find something, which hasn't happened too often.
Yeah, I had no idea that there was so much out there and so much rich history
Yeah,
to pull from.
yeah,
That's must make it so exciting.
it does. I mean, even uh, you can pull medieval costumes that were custom made for something from the 40s, and you're thinking, oh, what do you think this was? And sometimes, again, going back to Shot Deck, you can, and using sort of IMDb too, to look at like what movies were made in that particular year, you can figure out what those costumes were made for originally, which is, yeah, it's fun. It's a bonus.
Uh, I'm I'm super interested in the research part, and you mentioned at the start about looking at specific eras.
Mm-hmm.
I'm wondering, do you have a different process for when you're looking at specific cultures? And I'm particularly thinking of Family Style here as an
Oh,
example, because
yeah.
some beautiful costumes in
Thank
that.
you.
Is there? Well, thank you for bringing it to the screen, because it made that episode come to life. And
Oh, thank
there's
you.
other examples of it peppered throughout the show, but I think that's a particularly interesting one. Do you research that in a different way, or is that the same kind of process?
That in particular, I feel like I went with, I don't feel like I researched it culturally as much until I started. This is not to my credit, um, but I did a bit, yes. But when some of the actors came in, some of the women in particular, they were teaching me different things about when you wear the scarves tied a certain way or on your head, or and that it spoke of both whether you were from the north or south of India, whether you were from a specific religious background, so I was learning a lot on the job as well. And, again, there's not a master class available yet online that I've seen that can teach you how to, that specific, for costuming. But, that was a lot of fun. What I felt like was the lead thing that I chose to do on that particular episode was choose colors that I felt were the colors of the spices that they were cooking with. It was,
Nice.
yeah, like the paprikas and the cumins and
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
it's the deep paprika color and the orangey tones and the purples and all the different things that I felt were part of that like lavish feast of visuals that Deborah Pratt was set out to portray in that particular scenes and episode. Yeah.
You make the whole process sound like it's a lot of work, but you also make it sound so smooth. I'm interested in knowing what kind of real challenges have you come across. What would you say maybe over the first two seasons, up to where you can talk about, has been your biggest sticking point?
I mean, I won't lie. We gun hard all day. We really.
Yeah.
I have two shoppers that work, at least 12 hours a day, and they're out running around getting. I think that I have such a great crew that we try to infuse laughter in a lot of things, and and I think that keeps the wheels moving in a much nicer way. And yeah, there are days when I don't. It's not that I would feel defeated, but I'm like, just amazed at that the mountain still is there to climb. Let's say that. It's
Yeah.
just.
Yeah. Okay.
It's big, and then it just you can take it home with you, and it just rolls over the next day. But I try to be in early with everybody and knock it out, and try to have a little bit of evening left where people can be with their families, and and me too, so that we have some balance.
I feel like I'm getting a management masterclass from you now. Let's flip that. Let's flip that the other way. What's been your favourite era to visit? What's been the most fun that you've had?
I love the 30s, and primarily I
Yeah.
love the 20s, 30s, 40s. I just find the costume, the era is so fascinating to me. And if this tells you anything about me, one of my favorite TV shows is Babylon Berlin, which is the Weimar Republic era of Germany.
Okay.
And it's just something that just draws me to that era with the colors and the silhouettes of costumes and the hats, the cloches, and the different accessories that seemed, somewhat flamboyant, even if there wasn't any money to be had. That people would try to have hosiery, even if they didn't really have money. So, just some of my favorite films too are set in that era.
Are there, because we're only really 20-something episodes into the whole series, are there any eras that the show hasn't visited yet that you're hoping will come up at some point?
Oh, I also like the 60s.
Fair enough. Yeah, good. I can imagine that's a fun one to design.
Yeah, the early 60s. Yeah. I think we've covered, somewhere between, there was 1690 upcoming and 1892 in season 1. So somewhere in between there, we haven't covered any of that. And somewhere between 1892 and 1920, we haven't. So it'd be interesting to do maybe a turn of the century. It'd be the teens would be really interesting. Yeah. And not the teens of the aughts, the teens of the 19s.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
That'd be a lot of fun. And the costumes are so, I like using different painters as inspiration when we go back into the earlier periods. So
we talked earlier about the project side. I'm really conscious we didn't talk about Ian, and Ian has some fabulous outfits. Is that do you work with Mason particularly on that look?
Absolutely. We have epic fittings. Truly 2 hours go by and we're laughing and chatting and playing music. And I feel like we've had a wonderful evolution since the first time we met. Mm-hmm. And it has definitely shifted and evolved. And I find that somewhere between Ian and Jen, my muse resides. If I could dress myself like either of that, I see the way I'd want to dress in both of them is what I'm trying to say. So a lot of times, I can put things on Mason that like they're my paper doll. And it just, oh, wow, that looks amazing. And I love mixing, there's a lot of patterns, there's a lot of color, there's a lot of bold choices, there's, funky shoes, there's really fun jewelry. So it's always an ongoing process. And certainly when I dressed Alice Kremmelberg too, when she plays Rachel, we did do a thing that was how Rachel was part and parcel so that they had some connectivity in what they would wear. So that was a lot of fun. And Jen, Nanrisa looks beautiful in just about anything. She's another one where I can put her in oversized blazers and belt them and wear mini dresses and over the knee boots and things that are funky and real street style is her vibe. So she's always fun. And certainly the 2018 flashbacks in episode 201.
Oh my God, how have we not even talked about that? Yes, those flashbacks were so much fun for Jen and Ian particularly.
Yeah, we made that knockoff of, well, we got it cleared, of course, but the Tribe Called Quest Low End Theory t-shirt and, things like that spoke to her heart and my heart. She was in love. She was like, may I please have one of these? So that doesn't happen every day.
No. And you mentioned that evolution. I've noticed Magic's outfits. His early on the first few episodes he was in, it was very much slightly different color of the same suit week after week, but he seems to have been going through a bit of a change over time as well.
Yeah, well, we definitely for season 2 we've given him more casual elements. He was much more of a suit guy and a blazer guy in season 1, and we really wanted to convey that he went away and came back and is having that relationship and involved in a relationship, and and just has a, I mean, he every time he's on screen, you see the warmth of a father figure, and I feel like some of these knits that we have him in are, really convey that warmth even more. Now you're making me rethink what I'm putting him in 209.
Oh, interesting. Absolutely nothing wrong with the suits, but I think it really does. It sells the 3 years have passed.
Yeah.
You can see he's a slightly different person from the costume, and with the other actors, sometimes it's a bit more about the portrayal and the writing. But with Magic, you can definitely you can see it when he steps on screen.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, we tried to give everybody a bit of a twist, but not something. Not something that was too character altering.
Yeah. It's 3 years.
Correct.
And speaking of 3 years, this has been such a good conversation. I feel like I could carry on talking to you for 3 years. I feel like we've just scratched the surface. Genevieve, I hope I can invite you back on the show at some later point, maybe when the series comes to an end, which hopefully is many years from now, and we've got a lot more to look back on, a lot more to unpack, because I think there's so much more we could talk about. But for now, I'm really conscious of your time, and I think you've been very generous sharing so much about your process. I've learned a lot. I know the listeners will have done as well. So Great. Just wanted to say a great big thank you. And we really appreciate it.
Yeah, well, thank you from myself and also the Costume Design Guild. Anytime we're asked to talk about our craft and our love of it and explain the process, we are happy to. So thank you for shining a light on it.